So recording a podcast with 4 people these days is kind of difficult. Dave, Dr. Micah, doesn't look like you're practicing social distancing over there.
Now we're getting nice and tidy here.
You're kind of a little too close for comfort, I think.
Sharing a mic.
Anybody showing any
Not
symptoms?
as tidy as Anne Boleyn.
Anybody? Anybody with any symptoms? With what?
Joe's been watching the trip, have you?
The trip to Greece. Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon. Absolutely epic.
Terrible.
Are we
impression
already
of that impression.
making
but still.
obscure references?
Yeah, we're
No,
out.
not for
We're out of
people.
the gate, John. What have you got for us? We're on lockdown.
Well, last week we thought we wanted, naively as it turns out, we wanted to be done with the coronavirus like 4 weeks in a row. We're talking about it, but
Make it stop.
this is where we are. This is our reality. So it's pretty much all there is to talk about. 1 or 2 non-corona things we'll get to later. But let's start the show, guys, with, well, first of all, the usual reminder that, things are changing and developing so quickly that by the time you hear this, some of the things we're talking about will be very much out of date or changed somehow, and a lot more will happen between now and whenever we publish this in a couple of days, I think. So bear that in mind as we go through our list here. First of all, guys, we're closed down. Airlines, trains, cars, borders closed. The right step or extreme overreaction, or where do we stand on this?
You know what? Right now, I have no idea where this is going. I still believe this is all over an overreaction. No matter, public hygiene is important. Public health is important, but these steps they're taking, I'm not sure if they're going to help that much, and if they're not just going to impede normal life and economic function. It is a bit of an overreaction. But it might pay off. We'll see in
It seems
6
to be the
weeks.
most effective step anybody can take. No?
Pretty much the only step you can take. There are 2 things society could do. Start looking at hygiene more, washing hands, blah, blah, blah. That's the first thing. And then you have the government or authorities stepping in and stopping contact between people. There's really nothing in between there.
Seems to me that if China closed their borders about 3 months ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation. By the way, later this week, we'll be publishing a separate episode on the subject of just who we can blame, hint, hint, for this whole thing. But Dave, don't you think closing borders is the way to go?
Look, I think we're now in this situation where the approach clearly around the world is to isolate as much as possible, dampen down the curve, as we keep hearing. I'm really sick of that expression, and see what happens if we can get it right down. Can we lift these restrictions in a month, 6 weeks, and not have a big spike, not have it go back up? I like to believe there's something to that approach, because that seems to be the approach we're taking. That seems to be the best case scenario. Is that still on the table, Mike? Do you think that's realistic as a doctor? I don't know.
The problem with that question when you're asking me is that there's not enough data out there right now. We don't have the numbers. There's so many ways to calculate, to look at it. The populations have all differed, and it's so early for the data to be from the data that's been collected that you can't really say. I would hope that we can flatten the curve, quote unquote, and that there won't be a second spike right afterwards.
I would kind of be inclined at this point to say we've gone all in Poland on the locked border approach, and I think we need to stick to the strategy. I think it's been quite a bold strategy. The results seem to be there. Only 5-6 deaths so far, 6 at the point of recording this. Does that show a success in the closed border policy as opposed to, say, our closest neighbours like Germany?
Well, not really, because we've only had this policy of a kind of a lockdown for about a week now at the time of this recording. As we know, the incubation period for this virus is usually more in the range of 2 weeks. So the infections we're seeing right now are all the results of everything that was going on a week and a half ago. The closed borders will start having an influence on what we'll be seeing in about another week or 2 at the earliest. So if in 2 weeks we don't have a spike or the rate doesn't increase, then we can start talking about maybe the border closings helped.
Because, we're going to talk about the UK a little bit, because we spoke about this last week. Professor Whitty, seems to have a different take on this. He seems to think that, dampen the curve a little bit so the hospitals can cope. But in general, we need to develop a herd immunity. And I just want to discuss, a little bit how much that's going to throw a spanner in the works in terms of people's thinking, in terms of we were thinking, okay, there's one good approach to this. And then we have a very credible guy from a credible source saying, actually, I think what he's trying to say, and that's what I want to ask you, is whatever we do here when we come back out of isolation, it's going to go back up anyway because it's such an easily transmittable disease. And we're going to end up with the death rates we're talking about, whatever happens. So, there's a question to be asked about whether we wreck our economy in the process. Is that, as a medical man, is that the gist you're getting?
That is exactly. Well, there are probably lots of solutions to this problem, but we've had those two main ones discussed here. What they considered in the UK with Whitney and what they're doing in lots of other parts of the world. But the UK is kind of folded as well and is going the same route as the rest of Europe.
Sorry, Josh, just quickly, what is the current status of the UK border situation right now? Do you know?
Actually, right now, I don't know. I know as of the time that we're recording, it's been announced that all kind of pubs, bars, restaurants will have to be closed, and there's now going to be considerable restrictions in terms of public association.
Incoming flights? Are there still any incoming flights?
Well, I don't know.
I don't
You know
think
what? So many other countries have closed off their borders, and there are no ways to fly around right now. So they don't even have to close their borders.
There's limited numbers of people even traveling anyway. I mean,
let's bring it back here locally. One of the laws put in place over the last week has been based on the new concept of self-quarantine. A lot of people entering Poland from elsewhere, either by land borders or coming in through the airport, have been asked being the key word here, to self-quarantine 2 weeks at home. And the government started sending the police around to check these people at random. We learned this week that as of now, we're recording this on Friday, the 20th, there are just under 4,000 people in Małopolska, not nationally, but in Małopolska, 4,000 people under this apparent self-imposed quarantine. The police are going around checking them, and as of now, they're finding that roughly 15% or so of the people are not at home when they go around knocking on doors. They found people out for a walk or visiting friends. 3 people in Sosnowiec, which is down the road by Katowice, were 3 people in the same family decided to go shopping. They're now facing, just as everyone caught not at home is facing, a 5,000 zloty fine. This is a thing, and this is just the doors that police are knocking on, which is not all of them, obviously, and they're finding 15% not at home. Guys, what do we do with these people who have a flexible approach to self-quarantine?
Well, I actually think that if it's only 15% or so of people, then it's probably, in the bigger picture, not that grave of a problem.
You think it's naive to expect 100% compliance?
Well, no, I'm not saying that. Well, yes. I mean, I think as a side note, I think it is naive to expect 100% compliance. But really the point I'm making is that the whole nature of kind of infectious diseases, especially ones that are kind of airborne, is to do with concentration. And once you massively dilute the concentration of people who may or may not be capable of transmitting the disease, you massively reduce the opportunities for other people to contract it. So
it becomes this thing, though, doesn't it? I get what you're saying, but in this age of Twitter and Facebook, it's like, if most people are doing it, we're almost self-shaming everyone else. It's like, look, if I can't go to the pub, why are you going to the pub?
Well, I think that's absolutely
our society for 10th.
Yeah, and I'm in fact, I think I've been rather impressed by what I've seen about Polish society in terms of.
I have to agree with that. Yeah.
Nobody's particularly happy about the fact that you can no longer eat out or go to the pub or really do many things.
But that's my issue with Boris's whole take on this. It seems every day he's kind of catching up to the strategy in Poland, and each day the restrictions get tighter, and it's kind of like, well, why didn't you go in for a penny, in for a pound, just like they did in Poland and in other countries?
Well, I agree, and I think it's an interesting one, and I suspect that this is perhaps a kind of a difference between the way that kind of Polish people in general behave and British people in general behave, and British people kind of are very, very I mean, I'm not saying that Polish people aren't reluctant to have their kind of civil liberties curtailed, but it seems to me that if the reasons are persuasive enough, an allegedly highly contagious disease, then people are willing to kind of okay, well, it's not going to be fun, but, I'll put up with that. Whereas one has the feeling that in Britain, it's beep that, I'm going out for a drink. And
he means fuck that, by the way.
You do look slightly proud right now.
Dr. Mike. Are you in favor of coming down hard on these people? In other words, seriously enforcing fines and making them pay this 5,000 zloty for violating the self-quarantine?
Well, the law is the law. If I disagree with it, that's a completely different matter. But
I'm asking you, what do you think?
I'm always for executing every law to the fullest extent that's, actually can be argued that it's justifiable. or just that is. But
Are you a politician or something? What is that?
are you going to vote for me?
All right. Let me get a good... Dave, you have a solid answer on this?
On what?
Do we seriously make these people pay for violating the terms of the self-quarantine?
Well, it's been enforced. That's where you got the news story from. It was a story about the police enforcing
No,
this.
no. That's not the same. Finding them at home, finding them not at home is not the same.
I was a bit unclear.
To the court, and the court and
I
the
was a bit
prosecutor
unclear whether they've been diagnosed with the virus.
No, these are
No.
people that they are at risk, and
risk.
they say, okay, you came.
So they have symptoms and they've are
No.
at risk from another country. Okay, yeah. No, I mean, I do urge those people to take this seriously. I mean, it's a weird situation. Everybody's hurting financially, time wise. Everyone's cooped up at home. But like I say, it's one of them things. If we're gonna do it, let's do it right. So yeah, no, I'm in favour of the 5,000 zloty is only applied by a judge in a circumstance where they've really been blatant about it. It's 500 zloty in general, which is not a huge amount.
No, it's 5,000 zloty. If they say you stay at home and you go out, they find you out. It's
Yes,
5,000.
but as I said, that's the maximum enforced penalty.
Okay, so it should be enforced the
standard
maximum.
fine is 500 zloty.
They're allowing you in the country. They're letting you back in the country on the condition that you take a sensible adult approach to this and remove yourself from society for 2 weeks. That's all they're asking. And you can't do that under these circumstances. People say, yeah, fuck you. I'm going to go take a walk anyway. I'm going to go visit my friends anyway.
I'm going to go do my podcast anyway.
Exactly.
John, did you just fly in now? Yeah.
Get off your fucking horse,
Let me throw a theoretical out at you. Speaking of people under quarantine, here and there you see in the media, you hear these announcements that a confirmed case has been uncovered here in this neighborhood, that neighborhood. What do you think about this? Let's say, guys, let's say there's a confirmed case in your neighborhood, maybe really close in your neighborhood, in your oshedle, in your building. Do you have the right, or should you have the right to know who this person is so you can take the necessary precautions?
Well, technically, you should be taking those kind of precautions anyway.
Yeah.
So just knowing that there is a person you're building on that floor.
There's no need to get that big brother about it.
There's not a super heightened risk.
Yeah. Well, when I go out for a little walk to get to shopping, I just see people coming and I kind of just walk out of their way a little bit, don't I? Like, I mean, there's
That's what
nobody
I usually
around.
do. I don't like
Everybody just needs to watch each other's personal space. It's fine. It's 2 meters. I think, we are diluted by the great outdoors when you're outside, John. It's not that dangerous to be out walking near people, but, just don't, if you're jogging, run over and
So wait a second. Let's say, God forbid, you or somebody in your family contracts the coronavirus, and later you learn that a month earlier your neighbor had it, but nobody told you because they didn't feel you had the right to get it. That's okay with you?
I shouldn't have been licking the handles of the doors anyway.
Joking aside,
Why
really,
would
don't
you
wanna
have
know?
the contact with your neighbour? That's our question. Like, why would you have been within 2 meters of your neighbour if you're both on lockdown? These things that separate apartments called walls are quite effective germ separators.
And most normal people, even if they do go to work or to family functions and they have a cold, they say, oh, don't get too close to me, I have a cold or I have the flu, whatever. It's kind of a normal thing that when you're sick, you also want to tell people in your immediate area to,
So you
back
make no
off
distinction between taking general precautions against everybody and taking specific precautions against a specific individual who has this disease, this virus that everybody's
scared
talking
if John
about.
ever comes to power.
Seriously, you guys, you're full of shit. Josh, say something sensible.
He is kind of like growing that mustache a lot lately.
Go ahead.
Well, I think, one of the things that absolutely has to be clarified here is that this self-isolation quarantine thing applies to people who have recently returned to Poland from another country. It's not whether they have symptoms. It's not whether they are actually sick.
I'm talking about confirmed cases.
No. But I need to make this very, very clear. The self-isolation applies to people who have been allowed back across the borders. So it is very, very likely, out of these 4,000 people, that probably at most 10% are even within, a cough of being kind of like infected or may develop into it. The idea is, of course, is that you self-isolate for 14 days, which is the incubation period after 14 days. Well, if you start coughing and kind of needing a respirator, then clearly you have the disease.
All right. Can I make a suggestion? I'm starting to feel like I'm on a fucking Cobra committee or something. Can we talk about something that's a bit more tangential to the whole crisis, like something a bit more, less disease related?
The crisis is a disease.
Were you listening at the top of the show when I said almost everything is related to the
You
corona?
must have something else in there.
Yeah, we do, and we'll get to it in just a second. Any other rugs
John,
you want to pull
going
from
back
under
to
me?
your question about knowing if somebody in your building.
By the way, you guys are full of shit. You're all lying. None of you have the balls to give the right answer.
I honestly
You're telling
have
me
not-
that if your neighbor is a confirmed
that thought never even
virus
entered my head.
carrier, that you don't have you don't want to know. How? Please.
I saw my neighbour today twice from about 15 feet because there was no need to go over and shake hands or say hello because we understood we were both under quarantine. So it was like a nod of the head. You can nod your head at someone from 15 feet.
And a week ago, I had about because half my building is Airbnb. It was basically all Italian tourists.
You're so brave.
Do you want to go sit in the kitchen, Mike?
John, you seem to be like just wanting us to rail against something here, and we're not sure what you
No,
want.
I'm just trying to get you to tell the truth. What you want.
Though my wife has.
I honestly never. No, I will tell the truth. It never once has crossed my mind to kind of try and access some government database to find out if my neighbours are sick.
that's not the question
The idea
at all.
is you stay away from them, right? So what's the issue?
No, the question was if somebody in your vicinity has it, should they be obliged to make it public and make
No,
it
I
known?
get it. I get
your
exactly
answer
what
is
you're
no.
saying. My answer is no.
obliged, no, but
Just
I think
cause more
socially,
panic.
and we do that anyway.
How about the government force them to relocate to a quarantine zone and get them out of the population?
Quarantine in the building. The thing is, once they know that they have it, everybody in their building probably got it a few days before anyway.
Possible.
I think those are overreactions which will have
It's not
only
the Ebola virus. though,
minor,
like, you know,
minor influence.
yeah, exactly. I mean, if this thing was like, like outbreak shit, I got to stop.
I don't know. I barely see my neighbours at the best of times, and actually, since this whole started, I haven't seen them at all. I mean, I kind of, I can hear their murmurings through the wall partitions
They're a
or
bunch
whatever.
of, like, toddlers.
Seriously, when I come back into the building, I need to touch the keypad to get into the building. And then I climb the stairs. I avoid using the banister. Fortunately, I'm fit enough to be able to climb the stairs without such assistance. And I unlock
Bounce up them things like
I unlock my own front door, which is the only person who unlocks my front door. I go in, I close the door, and then I wash my hands. And like really, where is the risk?
There's also
You did say touching the keypad, right?
I wash my hands as soon as I get in.
Mm-hmm.
Is that why you've stopped wearing? Oh no, you never wore socks. Is this? That's not,
It never ceases to be a
Because he uses
subject
his
of
toes for the
total
keypad.
fascination for you guys.
actually
just never seen a man
Incredible dexterity with his toes.
I've seen a
Unbelievable.
city dweller
can actually-
wholeheartedly abandon the sock. It just seems controversial to me.
He can type
You
40
want me to do
words
the
per minute
European
with
thing
his
with sandals and
toes.
socks?
and your Euro
socks.
Yeah, yeah.
Sandals and
But my
socks.
wife has pointed out the
Stupidest
fact that
thing
she
ever.
loves the fact that everybody's now, stepping back. She hates the
There's
fact
a
that
lot more
Poland,
space when you
personal
walk
space is
outside.
always an issue. Now
Okay.
I'm waiting in line. There's
Let's make Dave happy and move on.
Extreme. I mean, two people in the bakery. Your wife likes this. You have to wait 10 feet outside the fucking door until everyone's ready.
A lot of space.
Well, no, but it's
5 minutes
a
for
massive
bread.
improvement on the guy standing right on top of you and talking on his mobile phone in the queue, which is one of my little
nobody's
bugbears
spreading that
about.
far
Let's
around
move on.
my,
We learned
neighborhood.
this week that the city is waiting on the delivery of 5,000 liters of disinfectant. I don't know what that looks like on a truck. I don't know how many trucks it takes to deliver 5,000 liters of anything.
I think one.
And this is,
Yeah, one not terribly large one.
That's
actually.
5 tons.
That's 5,000.
I'm assuming, I'm hoping this
Sound
is
like Dr. Evil.
concentrated disinfectant diluted with water. They use this, among other things, on trams and buses. We talked about last week how they have daily disinfecting routines. Certain public buildings like schools and hospitals. Guys, what do you...
Schools where no kids are going right now.
Exactly, the schools that are empty. 5,000 going to be enough, Dr. Mike?
Over to you, Mike.
I have no idea how much disinfectant you need for like a square meter, but I'm guessing, you carry around a bottle, half liter, and might be diluted with water.
Sounds like a lot,
fine
but
mist.
for a whole city.
For a whole city, I think it definitely lasts a while. A week or two, I'm guessing.
What else can we say about 5,000 liters of disinfectant?
That's
a tough
It's
one.
more than 4,900
No
litres.
more Corona opinions. I just got
tough
nothing
one.
else. Who gives a shit? Someone bought some disinfectant. Is this what we've sung to?
Are we on to the funny shaped vegetable
I
section?
beg you for a fresh angle, and you give me
Our next
1,000 liters of
our next
disinfectant.
coronavirus story. We learned this week from the government that the internet speed is down as much as 40% at certain times.
Due
of the
to
day.
what?
Not surprising, huh? What?
Red tube.
Due to what?
Due to what? Well, let me guess, Dave. A whole country sitting at home with not much to do but get online. Has this not occurred to you?
No, of course it does.
Okay.
I was just being.
Everybody's watching.
facetious.
Everybody's on the internet. Everybody's watching Netflix, and that's also something else in the news. We learned this week that the European Union decided to surface from wherever they've been hiding.
Hello.
There you go.
The European Union formally asked
Some
Netflix.
kind of Euro Union.
Formally asked Netflix to limit the ability of their customers to stream in 4K, thus freeing up some precious bandwidth to avoid a
Which Netflix
crash.
readily agreed to.
Yeah.
As we were covering on our other special about price gouging, there's very little incentives for companies to behave like dicks during this crisis, especially the bigger they are, actually, the more reputational damage it will cause. These companies will, fall over backwards to kind of accommodate. And I think, it's fair to say as well, these type of corporations will be the last to shed their workers. They'll be the most reluctant to kind of, let people go for an external reason like this. So,
we recorded an issue on issue.
I'm not surprised
episode,
Netflix
on
agreed
price
to it.
gouging will air later this week, I think.
a cracking
You guys
discussion.
spending more time on the internet than usual? Use this.
I'm working from home right now, so I'm on the internet all the time.
Everybody.
Do you know what? I was connected to the VPN connection today, and I was in a part of my apartment to get away from my little lovely boy who was, trying to distract me. And I noticed shit internet, and there was one bar all day, and I'm making calls, VoIP calls, perfect quality, absolutely no interruption in my working habits whatsoever. It dropped once out, and I just reconnected. And I'm thinking to myself, we're worried about all this 5G and all this bandwidth, and I'm having a crystal clear conversation with somebody, hundreds of miles away, thousands of miles away, and, there's no issues at all. We don't need that much internet. We can survive.
We need the internet. Don't question our.
No, we need it, but I mean,
We're strong. We can make it.
the
with a
amount of
20
it, the amount of bandwidth we already have is pretty amazing. Was the point I'm trying to say? The power of a little bit of internet in your bedroom now, you can run your office. And it wasn't a good connection. I wasn't plugged in or anything.
In the global mess that we're in right now, the only way it could get worse, or one of the ways it could get worse, is if the fucking internet crashed. How much?
The internet's not going to
How
fucking
much
crash.
worse would everything be if the internet crashed right now?
Oh, if we ran out of if
hours.
electricity stopped as well.
Oh, there's that too.
6 hours.
You can take my electricity first, internet second.
Look,
wait,
obviously-
I think I need one for the other.
Look, government's ordered to shut down. The last thing they're going to do is, drive us off that cliff edge. If it has to be that we can't stop this fucking virus and we all need to get back to work, then that's what we'll have to do. I think there's an important point to make, that this is we're trying to take a big shot at this. That's why we should take the isolation as serious as possible. And kind of, do as much as we can, because it's like, here's our strategy. Let's commit to it and see where we go in 4 to 6 weeks' time. I'm optimistic.
So
I'm optimistic for the drugs coming online, to get the death rate down. And once we get that under control, that these vulnerable people's lung conditions can be treated properly and efficiently, and the vaccines coming online in 18 months'
We're
time.
talking about drugs and vaccines. We're talking about the internet.
We're talking about the whole fucking situation. It's all tied together. It's all coronavirus all the time, baby.
Well, this is true.
So don't be pissing on my chips then.
Last week, the local government here in Krakow suspended fees for parking in the center of town to facilitate the necessary travel somehow associated with the current situation. But they have not, however, suspended the need to buy tickets for public transportation. They're still enforcing.
Because they're now, after months, indeed years of encouraging people to leave the car at home and use public transport, the current situation has rather switched things around, so they don't want people to take public transportation,
I thought this was
which
quite
means that kind of like leaving the tickets in place is obviously a sensible way of like, I can take the tram, but it's going to cost me, or if I've got a season ticket, obviously I've already paid for it, but that's...
It even might be worth doubling the price, but that would be controversial.
The explanation
would be
given by the
gouging,
city
wouldn't
government was that they can make parking for free because providing parking doesn't entail costs, whereas operating the public transport does entail costs, and so they need to get people to pay for it. But
No, I think they're specifically encouraging people to use their cars because that's a form of isolation.
Plus, of course, when you have controlled parking, you also have to have parking wardens who are salaried people walking around, kind of like
on your car.
basically kind of like, like justifying their salary by, levying parking fines. And once you remove all that, or once you no longer have the ability to have people walking around issuing tickets, then it's obvious, isn't it?
Well, the city's losing money from that, of course. But I was quoting the spokesman for the city government. That's their explanation, that they say that offering free parking doesn't entail costs, whereas, again, buses and trams do. Is there some argument for suspending the need to buy a ticket for public transport? I don't know.
No.
Is there?
In this scenario right now, no.
I don't think so. Any symptoms over there, Josh?
Well, sneezing is not considered one of them.
No? Okay, that's good. You know who's working hard?
I sneeze a lot, like in general. I have like not a light allergy, but I'm one of them people, like if the sun shines in my eyes, I go, I mean, it's common. I sneeze 3-4 times.
Should we have a little time out for a moment to share our allergies with the...
Just saying, I'm getting a lot of sneeze-based judgments in my life in the last month or so. I think I might need like a support group or some kind of hashtag.
A tissue.
You know who's working hard, among other people? And by the way, can we have a quick thank you for all the hospital workers and emergency services workers who are really,
oh my God, yeah,
working crazy hours now under crazy circumstances.
Cracking job, guys. You do a great job anyway. So
absolutely, everybody else gets to stay home. These people have to go out there and get. And of
course, the brave minimum wage retail workers who are serving us our groceries and delivering our pizzas.
I'm feeling guilty suddenly for making these people work when I go to the store. I feel guilty.
We talk about society grinding to a halt and all that, but of course that's not happening because a lot of people are out there working every day, and not only do they have to, they do it willingly and they do it without complaint, and we're grateful. Have you been to
I went to my local Carrefour the other day, and there's now this enormous thick sheet of bulletproof polycarbonate kind of, like blanking off the tills, and the same lady who works there all the time, and I kind of like, she's like,
And I've also noticed some customers in the large supermarkets kind of seem to expect that they're heading towards a medical professional and not a 19-year-old, trying to earn a bit of extra cash. And I've seen like customers giving out to them for not like doing the proper spray thing every time. Like give
them a break, man.
Hard to remember.
Spraying at your stores?
Well, some of the stores, what they do is they spray the card and they wipe every time a customer goes in. There's lines. Actually, I couldn't believe how quickly the infrastructure of coronavirus built up in my local supermarket.
I haven't seen that yet anywhere.
In our local supermarket, they're not very efficient generally, but they were all over this and burn and. And they have a line like in an airport where you're giving your passport now, and you can't cross that. And then there's another line suggesting.
Well, I have a strict policy of
shopping. You have to make sure not to go there.
I don't want to give them a plug. Fuck them.
I have a strict policy that any food that I buy is thoroughly cooked before I eat it.
Good policy, Josh. Weird, but
but solid.
Yeah.
Well, you know who else is working hard and maybe without the appreciation they deserve are the postmen, people who walk all over to bring your junk mail to your post office box so you can throw it away. They're getting an extra 50 zlotys, not daily, not weekly, not just extra 50 zlotys from the government, so they can buy their own disinfectant materials. This is an insult, guys. The amount, the fact that it's like, here, go buy your own. I mean, we depend on these people quite a bit.
This is like the company store thing, isn't it?
It seems like very good treatment, guys. What do you think?
We're going to pay you this much, and you can buy whatever you like as long as you buy it from the company store. No, it's not really like that, actually, is it?
No.
Fuck you on about?
But still,
it's a Johnny Cash song. It's great.
It is.
Dr. Mike, sympathy for the postman.
Kind of, but on the other hand.
Kind of?
At the Poczta Polska, yeah, but what's going on right now? I've got a package that's been u kuriera for the last 3 days.
Oh, you're going to complain. What happened?
I don't know. It was supposed to be delivered on Wednesday, and it's like, it will be delivered today.
You have a problem with your package.
You sure it's Poczta Polska? It's not DHL or somebody like that?
It's going to the Paczkomat, so it's InPost.
Okay. So 50 zlotys, which, as we discussed on our price gouging episode, which airs later this week, might not get you much hand sanitizer if you can find it at all. Wouldn't you think that as a government agency, the Poczta Polska would be in a position to maybe deliver the hand sanitizer itself rather than just say, here's 50
They're still waiting for the delivery.
Waiting for their own delivery. It's running late. Dave, nothing to add to this, I suppose?
Nope.
No, okay, thanks. Is that our last coronavirus?
Okay, we got any amusing news items?
So let's leave Corona behind us. 2 local news items here worth mentioning in the last week. One, a bit of bad news, more bad news, I guess I could say. A food truck, one of the food trucks on Divor caught fire. Actually, it exploded, pretty serious damage based on what we can see from the pictures. Dr. Mike, tell us about this food truck location and your speculation about which truck it was.
It's the one on Daivora, so closer to Vazinca Street, but not on the corner there. It's on the northern wall. I think we figured that part out. Yeah. So it could have been the French taco one. I'm not sure.
There is no northern wall. If it's that one, it would have been the western wall.
Western, but northern.
Northwest. The French taco one. Humanity.
The French taco one. Oh, there's the one out.
Sure, you're not talking about Jerusalem or something.
So thankfully, this happened like outside of business hours. I think. Right?
Yeah, it was early in the morning.
Propane tank,
and it was pretty quick too. So.
Yeah, I mean, it can happen. You can have a faulty tank, it starts bleeding gas. And I mean, there should be at least 2 fail-safes between the grill. It's not like leaving the grill on. There'd be no flame. I mean, it's very hard to always analyze a gas explosion until you get all the details. But I mean, there is an element that, food trucks are essentially little big metal boxes that you could easily fill with gas and turn into a bomb.
I haven't been down there in a while. I don't find myself in that neighborhood.
But generally, that won't happen. By the way,
have you guys noticed in the last couple of weeks? Are there any customers down there for the food truck and during these difficult times?
Yeah, I've noticed some of them are actually open. Brave food trucks, fucking brave.
I'm just curious to know if people are kind of afraid to.
People, they do Uber.
Firstly, there's Uber, which I think is probably doing cracking business at the moment.
Let's explain how deliveries works. Gives food to delivery driver, brings it to house.
But I've been
getting infected.
Okay, smart
I've been strolling around.
Lining up
doing actually, I would guess food trucks, delivery drivers. Domino's are trying to mass hire at the moment. They're trying to find brave moped souls all over the fucking world. This is going to be a boom for certain industries, but most are fucked.
So food trucks covered by the same rules that cover restaurants, that they have, in other words, they have to close and their only orders are to go? Or can you walk up?
You can be on your own in a food truck, prepping foods. And you're isolated.
Can you walk up to a food truck and buy something?
As far as I know, yeah. But you can't.
Navinos, because you're not eating in an enclosed area or anything like that. That's something that restaurants aren't allowed to do.
It was specifically allowed when they announced the close down legislation or whatever. They said if you're a single operator and you're making food, you can operate.
Nevertheless, I mean, of course, there's considerably less activity than there would be normally because people are like kind of, if you're a food truck where maybe you normally employ like 2 or 3 people to be serving, the chances are that you're probably those people are on kind of temporary vacation, and if you're the owner, you're kind of like opening it up at like 12 till 3, midday or whatever.
Because
there's very few people wandering around. So
yeah, I know, but you're talking about past traffic, and what I'm talking about is replacing that business. Any of these food trucks, I think actually, I'd be interested to hear from them. Maybe we'll try and get one of them on the show. Is there a chance with this?
I'm not sure we'd fit a food truck in the studio, but maybe one of the owners would. Yeah.
But yeah, what I'm saying is, with this many people at home, their market for deliveries has greatly increased, and I'm sure there's a pool of staff still willing to go out there and deliver food. Because essentially, it's not that dangerous, isn't it? You can just leave it there and kind of step back or whatever, and you grab it and then you leave it outside the door. I mean, delivering food has to be a part of our. That can't be ruled out.
Industry for sure right now.
I mean, get your money in Uber Eats.
Before we go to our last subject, just to segue to the restaurant business, if this current
restaurants with fixed costs and big rents and seats, they're in big trouble.
If this goes on for another few weeks, they are in huge trouble.
I'm just trying to draw one ray of possible light here. Don't get me wrong. Like, even if a truck that does coffee or something, like they're in big, they're done. Like, what I mean.
Well, as Josh said, even if it's like a 2 or 3 person operation, they're lean, they have low costs, but when there's no customers, there are no customers. And I don't know if they can survive like a 1 month or a 6 week drought of, basically zero income.
Of course, it really will depend business to business, but yeah, it's going to be so tough.
No, but I'm already hearing campaigns on the radio about people, suggesting, support your local restaurants and bars and cafes, order from them, and there are also certain businesses allowing you to buy vouchers from them that you pay them now.
Yeah, there's a lot
you can
of that
spend it,
going on
in a couple of months later when things are back to normal. So they'll have money to keep going right now.
Plus, I think the government is actually kind of, publicly pledging, like, and not just in Poland, of course. I mean, this is true for, around the world, really. I mean, kind of like governments are pledging vast amounts of money.
Do you know what? One thing I wanted to say is, if the government really wants to reassure business owners, don't defer zoos, cancel it. Fucking. That's what would really reassure business owners right now if they were told, actually half your tax bill currently we're going to wipe out, And that's something that they can say, okay, well, that's a massive part of my costs, at least down. Now I can think about paying my staff. And you know what? Most business owners, they want to keep good staff. They want to retain them. But it's got a massive tax bill in the post, you know.
Well, I suspect that
they're going to give direct aid, which will come in the form of allowing banks to lend. That's a much less effective way of delivering that kind of relief.
Well, I suspect that kind of, any final reckoning on this will be, pushed forward in the future, at least until we know whether this kind of, so far, 2-week or 14-day close down is going to stop after 14 days, or whether it's going to continue for any longer, because that will have an effect on what.
I think it's guaranteed to go on a bit longer.
Well, okay, but that's that's not the point at issue here. I mean, I think that any final decision will rest on how long people. If it turns out to have only been a fortnight, that's a very different thing from if it ends up being 2 months.
My suggestion about what I think should happen: if I was in power, I'd cancel. If you really want to say to business people, you know what? Be ready to start again. Our government's got your back. What you owe us, there's a big discount. That would fucking say to businesses, you know what? They do have our back. We're all in this together.
Well, there's a fair argument to be made that why on earth should you be paying Zeus when you're unable to conduct your business because of a health issue that the government is not their fault, but are unable to deal with. So why should you be paying into a system which is unable to help you?
Current relief package simply is talking about deferring it at the moment, and that's great. Deferring it, if it was only a 1 week shutdown, that would be a good bit of relief. But if we're talking about 6 to 8 weeks, I think they need to talk about cancelling at least 6 months.
The government has kind of got double standards on this help here, because they're saying right now that people can delay filing their taxes for more than a month, so until the end of May. The thing is, when you're filing your taxes, in most scenarios, it's a return of your own taxes. So the government is basically saying, you can wait an extra month with asking for your money back. So that's
plus, income tax relief only helps when you have income.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so.
Oh, and by the way, weren't we supposed to start talking about a food truck so we would stop talking about the coronavirus?
These businesses are looking at 2 months plus with no income.
No, you're right, John. You're completely right. VAT relief is another great step that you can give to businesses. We did this during the brutal recession we had post-meltdown in 2008, and we gave kind of big VAT discounts to the hospitality sector, particularly the most vulnerable businesses. And it worked a treat, like I'm saying. We're going to be doing massive scale QE type, easing of the economy, etc. And there's very good evidence that if you directly kind of lower people's tax bill, that's a much better, much more effective way. It's much more reassuring to people. It's much more effective, because essentially the other way of doing it is, releasing the taps for banks to lend, and then you're trusting each bank to lend to said businesses. But, I don't need to go on a rant to see how flawed that approach can be.
We're going to finish on a totally different note. You might recall back in, I think, November, that Wawelo, the local bicycle ride-sharing program, closed down for the winter with kind of uncertain prospects as to whether or not they would return in the spring. Well, sometime, I think it was in December, maybe in January, we learned that officially they would not be returning for various business reasons. So this left the operator with about 1,800, as I recall, 1,800 of those big, heavy tank-like blue bikes, which they kept in some field in Jabinets for a few weeks. Well, we just learned that the operator has decided to get rid of them, and pretty much the only way they can get rid of them, they're up for sale. And so if you want to have your very own, presumably redecorated or repainted or unbranded ex-Wawelo bike.
Is it still chipped, though? I mean, kind of if you buy one, can you be tracked wherever you go as you slowly pedal up some shallow incline with this heavy...
Don't know how much
one
it's
of those debt recovery vulture funds buys up your debt, starts chasing you for all those miles.
On your bike.
I guess you can sell anything for the right price. Do you want to have a bike that was obviously part of the bike sharing program?
Well, think of all those different arses that would have sat on that saddle.
Weird. I think people will actually, because as we've said a few times, it's a bit of a design icon in a way. It's well known in Krakow. I think the hipsters will stamp up a good few days.
Yeah, there might be a bunch of people that look back with nostalgia, because everything is nostalgia, even though it was last year right now. It's
so 2019.
You swing one around your head, you can take out a scooter right handy.
Oh. I think you just raised their prices by at least 20%.
So, Mike, you're
there.
saying it's going to be like an old Volkswagen bus from the 70s. It's going to have
Yeah,
like
it's a limited
second
stock.
life.
It's a one-time limited edition
Nice
thing.
analogy.
You like that? Okay. Like repaint it some kind of neon green or something. And
I'd be surprised
No, I
if
think
they're
the
still same
original,
color.
blue and gold color scheme is very much part of the appeal.
so you'll see them on the streets of Krakow soon, I guess. Exactly how they're going to look, we don't know.
seem
How
to
much they
cover this-
cost, I also don't know.
We seem to cover this a lot, the old Wawelo. This is our last ever Wawelo story.
I think this is the formal end of Wawelo on the show. This is it. Unless we get hit by one walking down the street or something. I have no idea. Well, there's your Corona update with a couple of extras for this week. Like I said, 5 weeks in a row on our KrakCast news, but this is where we are. This is what we have to talk about. Thanks for listening, everybody. Don't forget to go to our website, krakcast.pl. All of our back episodes there, along with the donate button. So hit that if you feel like supporting the show. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time on the news. Don't forget, by the way, later this week, 2 extra episodes this week. One on price gouging during the coronavirus crisis, and another on the subject of who we can point the finger at, who's behind all these troubles that we're talking about that Dave doesn't like to talk about.